y'all. We're here with another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina, Now What? Today's episode is our property management edition. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. So I have my good friend Alex here with KeyRenter Raleigh, and they're actually going to talk to us a little bit about the investment side as much as just the rental market in general. So Alex, if you would kind of give us a little bit of background on the company, how you got into this industry, and how long you've been in the area.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Laura. This is amazing to be here. So I started in property management about 6 years ago. I was leasing and managing residential rental property with a company called KeyRenter in Denver. And when I started there, we had about 100 properties under management, and over about 5 years, we grew it to 800 properties. We had an acquisition, and so definitely saw everything there is to see. I've personally leased and managed hundreds of rentals from one-bedroom condos all the way to 5+ bedrooms, 6,000 a month houses. So yeah, I've definitely seen a lot, been through a lot, and from a property management company standpoint, seen a ton within the industry specifically.
Well, so tell everybody, because I get asked this question all the time, how is the rental market here in the Triangle?
It's competitive for sure. It's definitely not a market where you're seeing like a whole lot of great opportunities because things get snatched up really quickly. And so I think it's all the more important to be working with a really good real estate professional in the marketplace so you can give yourself that competitive edge. But it's a high growth market. I chose to live here coming from Denver because I knew it was a market that was going to experience a lot of growth. And one of the most exciting things for me was coming here and seeing that there's still a lot of growth coming. It is not like plenty of other markets out there like Austin or Tampa or even Denver where those markets have really kind of, I think peaked as far as their growth goes.
It's settled.
Yeah, so there's a lot here to come still, even though it's pretty competitive. Yeah.
I would agree with that because I feel like people often compare now to like our COVID years, right? Where everybody, it seemed like in the entire United States, every metro went like this, where a lot have come skyrocketing back down in the opposite direction.
Absolutely.
Triangle's a little unique. We're very insulated, if you will, here. So I often like to tell people that it's cutthroat. I think you were much nicer in talking about the rental market. We very often in the housing market talk about if you sleep on it, you might not sleep in it. It's the same thing with rentals. It's really quick to be first application in and to make that decision in a very fast format. So let's talk about property management. Like, how do you guys do what you do? What services do you provide?
Yeah, I explain it to people, there's really two sides to property management. There's the leasing side, which is the process of marketing a home for a new renter. And then there is the on the ground property management side of things, which is coordinating maintenance, making sure rent gets paid on time, making sure the lease is followed, that sort of thing. So yeah, I really say you could split it up into those two categories. And as far as the costs go and as far as the work goes, it really gets split like that.
So if I'm an investor and I'm considering the Triangle as an opportunity, how valuable is it for us to utilize a property management group? Could it make or break the success of the property?
Hugely, hugely important. And especially where there's so much deviation in property management between companies. All the companies are run differently, they're staffed differently. And so having a property manager that can really be a resource on the purchase and the acquisition, or even the transition if somebody has a primary and they're looking to rent it out, having a property manager that can tell you what a home will rent for, and give you a realistic expectation there, so your numbers are correct. Give you insight on repairs or maintenance that's needed to get a home that's rent ready. Those are all things that property managers should and can help with, and finding the right company for you in that regard is hugely important for sure.
Yeah. So the analysis looks very similar, I would say, to how we list homes. So being able to go into a property and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to get ROI, so the most bang for your buck. Here's our timeline and here's our list price. So similar process, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Got it. So if I'm an investor and I'm thinking I definitely need property management, when should they reach out to you? Because we think about going under contract, closing on the house, and then typically that's when they think they're supposed to reach out. Where should they really kind of reach out to you?
I think that they should reach out during, as they're looking for rental property. And again, this kind of goes back to finding the right manager. I take the approach to property management that a really strong real estate professional like you would take, which is you want to have a very one-on-one relationship with your client, and I think that a good property manager should do that. So during the acquisition phase, when you're looking for good properties to acquire, the property manager should be advising on whether or not a property, basically what the property will rent for, and running those numbers is going to help you as the real estate professional helping them acquire that property determine if it makes sense for them to purchase.
So you're also bringing to mind protections that need to be in place. So writing a good lease. So I can definitely say no leases are the same. I feel like every time we've worked with somebody, typically it's been very different lease to lease. Some have been super stringent, some leave a lot to interpretation. So what type of protections should a renter look for, and what type of protections should a potential landlord look for?
Yeah, I would say that definitely a landlord should a good property manager should ask the landlord specifically what protections are needed for their specific property. Something that I always ask my client is, can you give me things that are care instructions for your property specifically? Maybe the countertops only should be cleaned with a specific cleaner. Maybe we want to make sure felt pads are put under furniture to avoid scratching the floors. Every property is unique. And so I ask investors, what should we put in the lease? And we can customize the lease, and we can have an addendum and put specific clauses and rules for the tenant to follow to better take care of that property. And so that's something that's important, because easily you could just have a blanket lease and have it be very, very general. So I like to get really specific when I'm talking to clients. For tenants, I would read through that lease, really understand what the language is saying, and have a conversation with the property management company or the agent that is managing that rental, and get really clear with them on what certain things mean and what they are. If a property manager knows what they're doing, they should be able to have that conversation and be transparent about what the lease says and what's expected.
Yeah, so I'm sure you have some horror stories of some things that have happened on either side, right? So do you mind sharing with us like one or two of these little nuggets of wisdom here?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that the first thing would just be not to cheap out on maintenance. And one of the stories I have is so I have a contractor who does really great work. And to be fair, I think it's important to have good people that do things at affordable rates. But I have one property that had a hose that hooked up to the washing machine that wasn't hooked up correctly. And it ended up in the middle of the night leaking and just going right through the ceiling all the way to the first floor, and just caused thousands in damage, like over $5,000 in damage for something that was literally, I think the plumber to fix that leak, it was like $250. But the biggest thing there was that wasn't the only thing that was wrong. The owners had somebody who really didn't know what they were doing do all these fixes throughout the house. And that cost them, thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's just one horror story that came from that. Tenant horror stories, my gosh. It's really when tenants aren't following the lease. And I think for me, I really like to treat property management again, I love comparing it to having a really good real estate agent. Really good realtor is going to build a relationship. And when property management goes south is when there's not that relationship with the client. And so what I try to do is I do all of our showings in person, whether it's an in-house agent or myself, and get to know that tenant, because when problems are going to arise is when the tenant feels that there's not a relationship in place. They don't know who's managing their property. They don't really care because the manager hasn't shown that they care. And so then they're going to feel like, I don't have to follow the lease or do these things, or I'm going to be difficult. And, when you have the rapport and you ask the tenant for a favor and they know you and you know them, it's a much better relationship and experience for everybody involved.
Sure. And I'm sure it streamlines the process too when you're creating a contract, right? If there's questions about lease start date, I think that's probably the most common one, right?
Definitely.
Or room for negotiation on the rental price is probably another big one. Having those conversations in person, go ahead and nipping it in the bud, putting it to bed, and then moving forward so you can actually create the documents. Then you're also probably going to trust the people that you're working with once you've had that face-to-face and that personal interaction.
100%.
Okay. So if I'm an investor, right? So I'm looking to do this process virtually. We have so many relocations happening. So we're seeing that in the resale side of things with homes, where we're having to help people do sight unseen. Rental sight unseen is a pretty common thing as well, because a lot of folks will also do that. Well, maybe I need to rent, get to know the area a little bit, and then buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that look? How can they connect with you on that?
Yeah, virtual showings are a real thing. I do plenty of showings with people who are out of state that want to tour via FaceTime or want to tour on Zoom. I mean, in our day and age, right? There's tons of ways we can do that easily. So I think it all comes back to the person that's managing the property, whether that's the homeowner or it's a property management company, getting in touch with somebody, having a contact, and then kind of going from there. Because a lot of us, and it's just the reality, we use a lot of software. And so, yeah, if you're not able to set up a tour virtually, then you can reach out to somebody. And if you can't get in touch with somebody, I think this is key. That's a red flag. If you're having issues, you really love the property, but you can't get in touch with somebody who's managing it, you should really take that and be prepared for what it's going to look like if you do decide to move forward.
Yeah, and I'd say that's pretty indicative with contracts and stuff as well, is the fact that if the other agent involved is not responding to communication, whether it's a rental or it's a new construction situation, whatever, that's definitely going to show what the contract is going to look like. So it's the same thing with the rental process.
And on the seller side too, I mean, so that would be like for, showing tenants, but yeah, I think like sellers too have a ton of resources at their disposal. Having a really good agent who's going to go to the property on your behalf, to scope things out, give you thoughts on how things look. I mean, I think that's definitely huge. And, I run rental analyses on properties all the time, sight unseen. Like, you can really accurately predict rent rates and property values without necessarily being boots on the ground. So I would say homeowners or people that are looking at purchasing out of state, I think you can do it. It's not as scary as I think some people might think it is.
Yeah. So let's talk about not scary versus scary scams that can happen with rentals. So sometimes people are looking on kind of third-party sites to find the best rental. And there's instructions in there about money changing hands when no application's been filed, no background check, no contract's been written. What should they think of, or how wary should they be?
Yeah, I think the platform that you're using to find a rental is key. The two platforms where we see the majority of scams are through Craigslist and through Facebook Marketplace. So I think looking on websites like Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, those are all really good sites. You just see less scams there. I think also, again, going back to getting in touch with a rep or the landlord or whoever is leasing or managing that property is key. Because then you have a person on the other end, and you're not kind of trusting that your application is going to the right place and your money's well spent. It's unfortunate in our industry. A lot of property management companies will profit off of applications. They'll accept 10 applications when they have 3 applications in already, and they just kind of keep the fees. We don't do that. We refund application fees and operate with integrity that way. But yeah, I think just spending a little bit extra effort to get in touch with who's managing the property makes all the difference.
Yeah, and that last little thing you said, I think, is super important, because sometimes you're not the first one in. So if you're putting out 10 different applications on 10 different properties, hoping you get one, that's a lot of money out of pocket for folks to lose and not get refunded.
For sure. And I think the property manager should be fine with accepting as many applications as possible. But if you're going to do that, then just have that dialogue with the person applying and say, hey, we're just going to keep you on file. If we don't move forward, we'll go ahead and just refund your fee. But I love it the landlords sure love it when we have a lot of people in the pipeline that want to rent their home. I for sure don't want to restrict that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good balance to have between the two, of keeping kind of like a moral status, right?
Exactly.
You use the word integrity, which I think is really important. So guys, Alex is going to be in the description of this episode. All of his contact info is there. I know I personally reach out to him a ton just to talk about the rental market in general and some trends and data and all the important things you need to find the right rental or to rent out your rental in a proper way. So feel free to connect with him directly. Again, share, follow the episode. We are going to be on podcast as well as YouTube. I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to share, and follow us on Instagram as well as YouTube. We're also on Apple Podcasts. Again, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate.